This book by Rabbi Chaim Vital, one of the most powerful books in our library. The book was written a little bit over 400 years ago by the dominating student of the Arizal, of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who's known as Rabbi Chaim Vital. We need to understand who is the Rabbi Chaim Vital. He was able to reach to a very high level of Ruach HaKodesh. So why is that important for us to know? Because this little book is the manual how to reach Ruach HaKodesh, the divine inspiration, even to reach to high levels of prophecy. So he's giving us a guide, how do you reach the Ruach HaKodesh? Now interestingly, he says here something interesting. I'm going to quote from the book itself, which is pretty amazing, that he says there are 4 parts of this book. I'll explain in a second what are the 4 parts. But the 4th part, that was concealed for many years. But he says, HaChelek HaRevi'i, the 4th part, Be'ofanei HaYichudim Atzmam, he teaches how to do Yichudim, unities in the world above, Asher Al Yadam Yusag Ruach HaKodesh, and by that you can achieve Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. Ka'asher Bachanti, I have tested it, Nisiti, I have experimented it, V'nit'amtu Al Yadi, and I can confirm it works. That's what he says on himself in the book. I have tested and applied these methods, and I can tell you it works. So he says on himself, and we do know that he had a very high level of Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh, this divine inspiration, is different levels of Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh means you can see people's past lives, you can read their minds, he was able to teleport himself to different places, reaching very high levels of divine inspiration, and of course levels of prophecy. He starts the book by saying that this is a book to work on my midot. That's kind of right. I want to learn it. Don't worry, you're not going to start having prophecies. Even if you learn the book very thoroughly, I don't think you're going to be from the ones who can reach to Ruach HaKodesh. You can try, but most likely it's not going to work. We're not learning the book for that. We're learning the book because he says this book is le'avodat hamidot, is to work on your characteristics and to refine your characteristics. And he says this is a book of Musar. This is a book where I rebuke you in order for you to be able to apply it and better yourself. And this is why we're learning it. And he says the 1st and 2nd chapter is to bring you to do tikkun hamidot, and really that's why we chose to learn the book. And he says, why do you want to refine your character traits? I'll quote from what he says, Ki hu hashlemut hanitzchi. Because when you're doing it, so this completion, this wholeness will be eternal. And the result will be shenidbeku bekonam, that you become attached to your Creator. And that's really what we want to achieve. We're not looking for prophecy or Ruach HaKodesh. We're looking to refine my character traits to a point that I will reach completion or wholeness. It's called shlemut, to reach my true potential, spiritually and physically, of course, but mainly spiritually. Why? Because the result is that I become attached to my master, to my Creator. But if I have all sorts of character traits that I need to work on, such as anger and jealousy, and I'm judgmental, impatient, lazy, and many other things, then it's stopping for me to coming closer to my Creator. It's stopping for me to become my true potential. So I need to learn how to work on my anger, how to work on me being jealous and being agitated, whatever it is. We're going to go through all the midot here. This is one of those powerful books that teach us how to work on my midot. He explains that once you were able to work on your midot, of course you can elevate yourself to a higher level by preparing yourself to start getting divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh. Now, here he's already taking us to the 3rd and the 4th chapter, which again, in a few minutes I will explain the 4 chapters. But he says here something that when a person is able to reach very high levels, I'm going to quote from what he's saying, Yesh mehem asher hayu mashbi'im bekochot shemot HaKodesh el HaMalachim. Some people reach to such high levels that they knew the names of the angels and how to hashbi'ah, to make the angels swear, and then to make the angels, as they say, spill the beans. So some people knew names of certain angels, and they would force the angel to do something. And by that, you were able to do things. But the problem is that many individuals got the information and used it in a negative way. It can be used both to good and to bad. That's why for many years, all this information, it wasn't so accessible. Because some people got their hands on it, evil individual, and says, if I will have my information, I will know how to... The term is להשביע את המלאך, not 100% translation, but what it means is to force an angel. An angel is a spiritual robot, by the way. Now, if you know how to decode or to hack into the code of the angel, then you are able to force him to do something, to command. Some people, they use it in a very evil way, to force angels to do certain things. If you know the angel's name and his code, then you can control the angels. Now, if you are a normal individual, you'll use it for positive things. If you're evil, then you'll use it for negative things. Therefore, this was concealed for many, many years. Originally, it all started when 4 great sages entered into the orchard. I'm sure you know the famous story. Arba Gdolei Israel נכנסו לפרדס. And it says, Arba Gdolei Israel, the giants of our nation, went into the orchard. The 4 of them, one of them is Ben Azai. Ben Azai, it says he peeked in and died. An orchard, of course, it's not necessarily an orchard of oranges. Rather, it means all the levels of the Torah, which is an acronym. Orchard in Hebrew is Pardes. It's an acronym of Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod. Pshat is the literal level. Drash is a more of a deeper explanation. Pshat is the literal. Remez is the hint. Drash is more deeper explanation. And Samech, the Sod, is the secret. But there's all 4 levels of the Torah, which of course only one will survive there. Ben Azai was the first one. Hitzitz v'met. He peeked in, died. The next one was Ben Zoma. Hitzitz v'nifga. He looked inside and he, excuse my language, kuko. He lost his mind, as they say. And there was another one, Acher, Elisha ben Abuya. He also died. And he also first became kuku. And the only one who survived was Rabbi Akiva, who peeked inside. Yichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. And Rabbi Akiva reached to the highest of all levels. He knew everything and everything. He was able to come down. Rabbi Akiva was a great Mekubal. He knew almost everything in the structure of the spiritual world, and came down and wrote a few books that most people never even heard of them, with all the secrets of the universe. So Rabbi Akiva was a giant. Since there was too much damage with this whole Pardes thing, then many didn't know all this information. And he says the problem was that many people would ask or will seek very high levels in Kedusha. Why? To reach prophecy. And when you have prophecy, you have power. Prophecy is a powerful tool. But anyways, some people, by default, they refine themselves and they get what's called a Gilui Eliyahu, that Eliyahu, a Navi, reveals himself to them. And from that they learn, like the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, and many others. But the point is, he's just telling this in the introduction, because the book is divided into 4 parts. I'll explain now the parts, but the 3rd and the 4th, really, which I don't know if we're going to learn them because it's almost irrelevant. It's very hard to understand. I don't think we're going to go through the entire book. I think we're going to go through for what's important to us. Because the 4th part, for sure, has nothing to do with us. You can read it. I mean, we can read it. It's not going to learn anything from that. I think we should focus on what's important. But nevertheless, he's just saying here, in simple words, that if you follow the manual, you can reach to very high level of Ruach HaKodesh and to be able to perform all sorts of things that are supernatural. And later on, of course, reach to a higher level. Very few people were able to. The reason why it's not recommended, because if giants of Israel, like Ben Azai, peeked inside and died, we are going to be incinerated if we peek inside. So therefore, he also brings, don't think this is something you can handle. Rabbi Akiva was really the only one who was able to go in and go out. That's why, to many, why do people are afraid of learning Kabbalah and Zohar? Because they say, oh, I heard you can go crazy from that. If you open a door that's not supposed to be open, or you cross through a gate that you're not supposed to cross, not good things can happen. So therefore, many evil people who try to have their hands on the information, they suffer their own death with their own curiosity. But more important is to follow what's important to us. And I will read very briefly what he explains, at least on the 2 first part. The first part, the book is divided into 4. The first part, he's teaching how to live your life in the path of Chassidut, Chassidut means that you go beyond the letter of the law. Everything that you do is beyond what Hashem requires from you. And also the way of prishut. The translation is abstinence. But prishut means that you move yourself away from anything that you don't really need. I can eat. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah I'm not allowed to eat. But I don't throughout the week. Just a cup of water, maybe a piece of bread. I don't need more than that. Why? Because when you're segregating yourself and you're removing yourself from the little things, and specifically from all sorts of physical pleasures that you don't need, that's how you start climbing in higher levels. You cannot reach to high levels if you're eating cakes all day long and indulging in all sorts of physical pleasures. So this is called prishut. So some people, when they reach to a certain level in Kedusha, in holiness, and they're already aware, they understand, they have knowledge, but they want much more, the next level is to start separating from the world. And some people, that's what they used to do. They used to completely separate themselves from the world. They're called prushim. And they would not benefit or take anything from this world. Everything had to be the bare minimum. Why? Because eventually, at some point, you start separating from the world. We are very attached to food, to beautiful clothes, to good sense, comfortable things. I'm not talking right now of pleasures. This pleasures is for a very low level. So he starts teaching in the first level the paths of Chassidut and the paths of Prishut, which eventually will bring you to Ruach HaKodesh. If you're really applying, now don't think this happens within 3 months, it can take you 30 years to live a life of the path of Chassidut, that your entire life is dedicated to the Torah, and a life of Prishut, that you don't take any pleasure, you don't derive anything from this world. Eventually you can start going into the path of Ruach HaKodesh. The first part is divided into 6 gates. And again, it's all called gates. Why? Because the gate is there. He opens up the gate for you. You choose if you can pass to the next part. The second part is more rebuking. And what is the rebuking? He explains in depth punishment for all the sins and the rewards for all the mitzvot. And specifically for the positive mitzvot and the negative mitzvot. So this is more rebuking. If you do this, this will happen. You don't do this, that will happen. But we need to know that because you want to be aware what happens when you do a certain mitzvah, what rewards you get, what damage you do when you're doing an averah. So he calls it tochechot, rebuking. But rebuke for the sake of you getting better, not for putting you down and making you feel like a rag. It's for you to understand the depth and the severity of your behavior in order for you to refine yourself. And in the second part, there are 7 gates. The third gate, it's called Hanhagat Hasagat Ruach HaKodesh. How to achieve Ruach HaKodesh, which is divided into 8 gates. And the fourth chapter, or the fourth part, is how to do what's called Yichudim. It's called Yichud Elyon. Some of you who pray with the Sephardi Siddur, you notice that almost before everything that we do, we say, L'Shem Yichud Kudsha B'Richu Shchinteh, for the sake of the unity of the Master of the Universe and the Shekhinah. This is called Yichud. Yichud is the unity. Now when you know how to do unities, Yichudim, in the world above, which can only be done with holy names of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, then you're able to, so to say, I'm going to use the wrong word, manipulate, but you're able to do some type of an effect in the world above that can right away has a result in the world below. And therefore, a person is able to reach the prophecy in Ruach HaKodesh. This is called Yichudim, and don't think you're going to be able to do it. The Rizal was able to do Yichudim, by the way. And some people, they live in some fantasy that they can do that. You can't do that, by the way. It's interesting to learn. But nevertheless, he talks about it, and he also says on himself, I have tested it, I have tried it, I can assure you it works. And I'm pretty sure that he went to a certain level and didn't go too far in, because that's where things become complicated. And as he says, and I will read it again, Asher al yadam yusag Ruach HaKodesh, that by these yichudim, by these spiritual unities, you can reach Ruach HaKodesh. Kasher bachanti, I have tested it. Nisiti, I have tried it. Venit amtu al yadi, and I can confirm that it works. I'm just going to now very briefly go through the parts, just so that we know what we're up for. So the first part, he's calling it Mivnei Ha'adam, the structure of the human, which he goes into depth about the 4 elements. earth, fire, air, and water. And he calls it the structure of the human, Mivnei Adam, both spiritual and physical. Like I told you, this has 6 gates, and it comes to break down also the severity of the damage of my inappropriate behavior. That's really what it will start breaking down to. When a person does sins, he creates a certain blemish, a damage to the soul and to the world above. And by that, he starts explaining how and what and how to fix it, how to do tikkunim for certain things, what does the damage, why a certain sin will cause a damage. And by you understanding that, it makes you more aware why not to do a certain sin. This is not just a commandment or a recommendation. It explains, and also goes to a higher level, what happens when I do things that are inappropriate or indecent behavior. Not necessarily that I didn't put tefillin on, or I mixed meat and dairy. Also when I behave in a certain way. The first part really is very, very thorough and extremely interesting. The second part, this is really mainly focusing on tikkun hamidot. That's the part where we're going to start really working on refining our character traits, and explains it in depth. And like I told you, the third part is very interesting. We're going to learn what's applying to us. What's really applying to us is how we do what is called the chibur neshama elyona latachtona. How I'm connecting my higher soul to my lower soul. Because 99% of my real soul, it's called neshama elyona. My supreme, my exalted, my high soul, it's in the world above. It doesn't even come down here. But a little piece of the neshama comes into the body, and that's called neshama tachtona, the lower part of the soul. If you're able to connect them both, then you get a lot of inspiration from your higher soul, which can eventually lead to Ruach HaKodesh and prophecy. But it gives you a better intuition, gives you a more clear connection to the world above. When your prayers are much more clear, you learn, everything is more clear. We're going to focus on what's called Chibur Neshama Elyona Tachtona, connecting my soul from the world above to the world below. And like I told you, the fourth part, I don't know how much we're going to get into it. This is how you reach the Ruach HaKodesh, which is extremely, extremely interesting. But I can tell you already that even if we go through it, a lot of it doesn't make much sense. We're going to learn what's important to us. So with that said, we are going to start a very interesting journey into this powerful book written by one of the most powerful souls in our history, a pillar in the Torah. And by the way, I've been talking constantly how great Rabbi Chaim Vital is in the path of Kabbalah. But before he started learning with Rizal, he was a giant, a genius in Nigle, in the revealed part of the Torah. All these Kabbalistic giants first had unbelievable knowledge in the revealed part of the Torah. It's not that they just used Kabbalah. Rabbi Chaim Vital was literally a giant in the oral part of the Torah, which later on, because of that level, he was able to go into the next realm of the mystical part of the Torah. So the information is coming directly from the Arizal, chewed and digested by Rabbi Chaim Vital and delivered to us with a taste of Kabbalah, but the aftertaste is how to refine myself. And that's really what we want to achieve. I want to achieve tikkun hamidot. I want to refine my characteristics, my emotions, my behavior. The fact that I need to follow Torah and mitzvot, that's equal to all of us. We all have to follow the same mitzvot. There's no difference between one and the other. But when it comes to tikkun hamidot, that's personal to me. We all put the same tefillin, by the way. You don't have different tefillin than me. And we all have to follow the same Torah, the same way. That's where we have a common denominator. But when it comes to refining myself, it's me. You don't have the same characteristics as me. I'm lazy, you're not. I'm full of anger, you're not. You're jealous, I'm not. Whatever it is, that's personal. And that's really how you get attached to the Master of the universe, and that's eternal. That's what brings you to a completion. And that's really what it all boils down to. We came down here as a dirty diamond, and Hashem says, here's tools, refine that diamond, polish it. I want you to come back and give me a beautiful, polished, clean, 5,000 carat diamond. That's really what I came. I came here as a dirty soul, full of bad character traits. Now work on it. Now the fact that I can acknowledge that I have an issue with jealousy or anger, that's okay. You already went 50% to the process, acknowledging you have a problem. But how do you work on it? How do you work on your anger? How do you work on yourself to stop being judgmental, or not to be lazy, or not to be any of these horrible character traits? And personally, you want to refine yourself, because that's how you reach to completion. Then your mitzvot are performed in completion. And eventually for your eternal life, you are attached to your Creator. So this is the book, one of the many, but one of the top ones, that will allow us to reach there and to get to that point. So we are going to start a very powerful journey. It's not a big book. Look at it. It's very, very small. So I don't think it's going to take us much. There's going to be a lot of explanation and example. The book is going to help us reach to a much, much higher place of our existence. So I invite you to join us on this wonderful journey.